In 1974, on a foggy evening in London, a journalist opened a package left at his doorstep. Inside, yellowed pages, stamped with strange seals, written in a language that mixed bureaucracy with the arcane. The papers spoke of secret societies, of experiments hidden beneath rituals, of techniques so precise they blurred the line between faith and manipulation. Mind control, conducted not with machines alone, but with symbols carved into ceremonies older than empires. What truths could be so dangerous that they had to remain unseen? And why were they delivered to him, anonymously, as if the shadows themselves wanted the story to surface? Have you ever felt that history leaves deliberate gaps, as if certain pages were torn out, leaving only whispers behind? These documents hinted at networks where power was not just political or financial, but psychological, an invisible web capable of steering entire nations. Secret rituals, repeated across centuries, were not meaningless traditions, but coded technologies of the mind. And if the words in those files are true, then the past we thought we knew may only be the cover story of a deeper, darker reality. Tonight, we'll walk through those revelations together. We'll trace how hidden symbols embedded in temples, cathedrals, and even modern monuments still speak to the unconscious mind. We'll uncover the rituals that once summoned devotion, fear, or obedience, and see how those same methods evolved into hidden technology capable of reaching millions at once. What you'll discover may surprise you or disturb you, or awaken you to patterns you've always felt but never named. Did you notice how the same signs appear in movies, in logos, in the very architecture of our cities? Could it all be coincidence, or a carefully orchestrated design? If you're ready to open this sealed box of forbidden knowledge, stay with me. Write in the comments, "I see the hidden signs," and don't forget to subscribe, because what we are about to uncover will pull you deeper into a mystery that stretches far beyond one journalist in London, and into the very roots of how unseen forces shape the human mind. But this is only the beginning, the surface of something much larger, waiting just beyond the veil. Among the pages scattered across the journalist's desk, one section stood out. Sketches, diagrams, notes written in hurried hand. They spoke of hidden symbols carved deep into temples now forgotten, etched into coins that pass silently from hand to hand, built into the very walls of government buildings. The Eye of Horus, the pentagram, the double-headed eagle, marks dismissed by most as superstition or ornament. But what if they were not decorations at all? What if they were codes, designed to bypass the conscious mind and whisper directly to the subconscious, shaping perception without permission? For centuries, secret societies insisted that symbols carried a frequency of their own. Not sound, not light, but something deeper, something that stirred the unseen. Occult rituals often began and ended with the drawing of such marks, as if anchoring invisible currents to physical space. The ancients spoke of them as gateways, reminders of forbidden knowledge too dangerous to speak aloud. And yet, the same forms reappear across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. How does a serpent swallowing its own tail find its way into Egyptian tombs, Norse carvings, and modern corporations? Alike? Coincidence? Or continuity? Imagine walking through a city you believe you know. The statues in the square, the emblems above banks, the logos flickering on billboards. Suddenly you realize that you've seen these shapes before, in the very diagrams that linked hidden power to psychological influence. How many times have you passed beneath an arch that was more than stone, or carried currency that bore not just numbers, but messages meant to implant trust, loyalty, or fear? The YA. Manipulation works best when it is unseen, when it hides in plain sight, when truth disguises itself as routine. Some researchers suggest that these symbols act as triggers, igniting collective memory encoded in the human mind since the earliest civilizations. Ancient codes, they called them, etched into the collective unconscious. Jung hinted at this through archetypes, but secret societies transformed theory into practice, weaving these designs into rituals meant to command obedience. To the uninitiated, a pentagram was a star. To the initiate, it was a map of forces, an unseen structure capable of bending reality itself. Write in the comments, "I will not be controlled." The documents revealed patterns that could not be ignored. Why does the all-seeing eye stand above the pyramid on the American dollar? Why does the staff of serpents entwined appear both in medicine and in arcane manuscripts? Why do world powers continue to rebuild monuments echoing the same geometry used in ancient temples dedicated to gods long abandoned? Could these be harmless relics of history? Or proof that the dark agenda guiding humanity has always relied on silent commands hidden in stone, metal, and ink? But symbols alone do not explain the full scope. They are only the script, waiting for actors. The rituals that gave them life, the ceremonies that activated their force, remain shrouded in secrecy. And within the documents, hints appear, references to gatherings where signs were not merely drawn, but performed, spoken, sung. If these marks could shape thought when carved into monuments, imagine what could happen when amplified by ritual, by collective energy, by technology yet to come. The manuscript dated 1893 describes something far more elaborate than simple gatherings. It hinted at chambers carved beneath the earth, cloaked in shadows, where rituals were fused with methods that seemed to anticipate modern science. It spoke of chants not merely as words of devotion, but as instruments calibrated to resonate with low frequencies. These sounds, below the threshold of normal hearing, were said to bypass conscious thought and settle directly into the nervous system. Coupled with hidden symbols etched into the walls and ceilings, the ceremonies became a theater of suggestion, designed to alter consciousness itself. What appeared to the uninitiated as mysticism was, in truth, an early experiment in mind control, a merging of ancient codes with techniques that science would not openly acknowledge for decades. Witnesses, whose accounts were buried in the folds of the manuscript, described the same unsettling pattern. Upon entering the subterranean halls of the Order of Thelema, they felt an invisible pressure, as though the air itself carried weight. Torches flickered in rhythmic pulses, drummers beat in low intervals, and symbols projected by shadows seemed to move upon the stone. Within minutes, participants slipped into states of trance, some euphoric, others fearful, but all susceptible. Psychological influence took root. Suggestions planted during the ritual clung long after the candles were extinguished. These were not gatherings of worship. They were experiments in manipulation, dressed as devotion, perfected in secrecy. The documents hinted that these sessions were not merely spiritual endeavors, but were financed, supplied, and perhaps even directed by forces far beyond the order itself. Hidden power always leaves fingerprints, funds that never trace back to a single source, benefactors that remain unnamed, interests that reach into politics and industry. Why would elites invest in rituals of altered states unless they understood their potential? Unless they recognized that mind control, seeded in shadows, could one day expand into something greater? And here lies the most unsettling question. Who benefited from these experiments? And how far did their influence reach? The more we examine, the clearer the web becomes. Secret societies have always cloaked their work in mystery, but behind the veils of occult rituals lie structures as precise as any laboratory. Symbols act as the script, frequencies as the stage, and human consciousness as the raw material to be molded. A dark agenda unfolds not in sudden revelations, but in slow conditioning, in the subtle rewriting of what people feel, remember, and believe. Write in the comments, "I will not be controlled." And yet, the manuscript only scratches the surface. It leaves questions suspended, half answered, perhaps deliberately so. Who financed the chambers? Who recorded the experiments? Why do similar patterns of ritual and frequency appear again in later decades, embedded not only in secret orders, but in governments and industries? If what we've seen here is real, then the line between sacred ritual and hidden technology may have dissolved long ago. And what followed would be something far more ambitious, stretching into realms that touch every life without ever revealing its true face. The manuscript led to another unsettling discovery. Records dated 1937, written in the language of both science and secrecy, revealed connections that stretched beyond coincidence. There were mentions of the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati, and other secret societies whose names echo like shadows through history. These documents did not describe faith, devotion, or tradition. They outlined experiments, psychological experiments that eerily resembled what decades later would surface as MK Ultra. But here was the shocking revelation. The notes insisted that these tests had not begun in the 20th century. They were the continuation of something far older, rituals masked as religion, carefully preserved and refined, passing silently through centuries like an unbroken chain. Imagine standing inside a medieval cathedral, the chants rising, the incense burning, the light filtered through stained glass casting hidden symbols. Across the congregation, to the faithful, it was worship. To those initiated, it was an experiment, a collective trance induced through repetition, rhythm, geometry, and suggestion. The architecture itself designed to amplify resonance, to create altered states of consciousness. What we believed was faith might have been the testing ground for forbidden knowledge, rehearsals for mind control long before science gave it a name. By 1937, these practices reappeared not in temples, but in air laboratories. The rituals were stripped of robes and incense, replaced with electrodes, sound waves, and chemical compounds. Yet the principles remained unchanged. Symbols became diagrams, chants became frequencies, initiations became clinical sessions. Hidden power adapted to new language, but the goal was the same: psychological influence over the individual and eventually the collective. Conspiracies do not emerge overnight. They evolve in silence, shifting forms, adjusting masks, but always moving toward control. The documents also revealed a disturbing continuity of symbols. The same hidden symbols carved into ancient temples reappeared in official seals, political insignias, and even medical emblems. The serpent coiled around the staff, the all-seeing eye, the pentagram, the compass and square, emblems carried forward as if tethered to an unseen force. Could these be remnants of ancient codes, preserved not as heritage, but as tools? Tools designed to command loyalty, obedience, even submission. And if so, what kind of awakening would it take for humanity to see the truth staring back at them from stone, paper, and screens? Write in the comments, "I will not be controlled." The question that lingers is not only how these practices survived, but why they were never exposed. How many revolutions, wars, or cultural shifts were subtly steered by hands unseen, guided by techniques rooted in occult rituals masquerading as belief? The line between religion, science, and control becomes thinner with each revelation. And while MK Ultra shocked the world when fragments of its reality were uncovered, perhaps it was never a beginning, but merely a continuation. What has changed since then? Have these methods grown more refined, more precise, hidden now not in temples or laboratories, but in the technologies that surround us every day? If rituals once commanded crowds in stone chambers, and experiments once bent minds in secret rooms, what happens when the same principles are fused with global networks, screens, and devices we willingly hold in our hands? The answer may already be unfolding, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those willing to connect the final threads. The darkest pages of the archive carried names still whispered today. Not relics of the past, but secret societies that adapted, survived, and learned how to cloak themselves within the very fabric of culture. They no longer hid only in cathedrals or lodges. They projected their hidden symbols into political campaigns, advertising strategies, even the cinema. A gesture on stage, a design in a logo, a frame lingering in a film. Details so subtle the conscious mind overlooks them, yet powerful enough to shape collective thought. This was no longer worship disguised as ritual. It was manipulation disguised as progress. Imagine watching a film that millions will see. Beneath the story, beneath the drama, certain shapes and numbers reappear. An eye reflected in glass, a pentagram woven into architecture, a serpent hidden in the set design. To the casual viewer, it is decoration. To the initiated, it is an invocation. Occult rituals woven into entertainment, designed to plant seeds in the subconscious. And when these symbols are amplified by music, rhythm, and spectacle, the effect multiplies. Collective awakening is steered not by truth, but by shadows directing perception from behind the screen. Political campaigns have long understood the same principle. A rally, drenched in color schemes tied to ancient codes. Gestures repeated by leaders, crowds responding without knowing why. The human mind, exposed to these signals, resonates. Psychological influence seeps in. The crowd does not feel controlled. It feels inspired, moved, awakened. Yet beneath the passion lies the dark agenda, obedience disguised as choice. Write in the comments, "I will not be controlled." Even advertising follows the same path. Symbols repackaged as brands, slogans repeating like mantras, music tuned to frequencies that bypass logic and embed desire. Have you noticed how the same motifs travel from ancient stone carvings to the logos of corporations, from temple altars to glossy billboards? Could this continuity be coincidence, or proof of a hidden power steering culture with invisible strings? What unsettles most is not that these societies exist, but how far their influence extends. If their symbols guide politics, if their rituals are embedded in entertainment, if their codes shape the very architecture of our cities, then the question is no longer whether their power is real. The question is, where does it end? And what unseen force waits in the silence, guiding not just our choices, but the very structure of reality we believe to be our own? Buried among the fading manuscripts and coded diagrams, one dossier stood apart. Its cover bore a single phrase in Latin, Veritas Obscura, the obscure truth. Inside, the tone was colder, more calculated than any ritualistic record or symbolic chart. It was not speculation. It was not theory. It was a plan. Pages outlined with precision the goal that tied centuries of occult rituals, hidden symbols, and clandestine experiments together. The objective was clear. Entire societies reduced to marionettes, guided not by reason or choice, but by invisible strings of suggestion, frequency, and image. Mind control not as an experiment, but as a doctrine. The dossier revealed that what seemed like scattered practices, chants in cathedrals, sigils carved into temples, low-frequency experiments in shadowed labs, were never separate. They were fragments of a single tapestry, stitched across generations. The forbidden knowledge of the ancients had merged seamlessly with the technologies of the modern age, and the result was chilling. Imagine a ritual amplified not by a few dozen initiates in a hidden chamber, but by millions through television screens, radios, cinemas. Imagine symbols not etched in stone, but projected in light, broadcast across nations. The unseen became systemic, embedded in culture, normalized as progress. The dossier described mechanisms of manipulation so refined they bordered on invisible. Repetition of patterns in media, color schemes tied to emotional responses, frequencies woven into soundtracks, subtle geometric arrangements in architecture meant to impress subconscious awe. a dark agenda not shouted but whispered into daily life, until resistance became unthinkable because influence was everywhere. And as each layer sank deeper, the shadows no longer needed force. Obedience became voluntary because belief itself was sculpted. The journalist who held these pages noted that the handwriting alternated between clinical detail and cryptic symbolism. Diagrams of circuits lay beside pentagrams. Charts of psychological influence sat next to invocations that belonged to ancient codes. The fusion was unmistakable. Science serving ritual, ritual serving power. The goal was not knowledge for discovery, but knowledge as a weapon. Forbidden knowledge meant to remain hidden, weaponized only by those who walked behind the veil. Write in the comments, "I see the signs." But what truly unsettles is the timing. This dossier was marked not as prophecy, but as record. It spoke of operations that had already begun in the early decades of the 20th century, echoing forward into infrastructures that still exist today. If this was written decades ago, how much has been refined since then? How many layers of manipulation have been added in silence, beyond the reach of public awareness? And if the Veritas Obscura was the final file they allowed to be seen, what remains locked away, hidden in vaults where truth is preserved only for the unseen hands that script reality itself? You've reached the end of this journey, and that already sets you apart. Few dare to look at the patterns behind the veil, to trace the threads of hidden symbols, secret societies, and the forbidden knowledge that still echoes in the present. But if you are here, it means you're ready to walk further into the unseen. What we've uncovered tonight is only a fragment, a glimpse of a larger design that still shapes the world in silence. If these revelations spoke to you, leave your mark. Write in the comments, "I see the hidden truth." It may look like just a phrase, but words carry weight. They become signs of awakening, reminders that you refuse to be lulled into shadows. Press the like softly, as a signal that the truth resonates within you. And if you seek more, subscribe, not as routine, but as a vow to keep walking deeper, step by step, into places where the unseen hides its power. This is not the end, only a doorway. The next video continues the path, another fragment of the puzzle waiting to be uncovered. Follow it, as if following a symbol carved into stone, a clue left behind for those who choose to see. Because once you start, the journey cannot be undone. The shadows may resist, but the revelations grow louder, and the question remains, how much of the truth are you ready to face?